Again, this year we'll end the year overall in terms of current account surplus. It's obviously being helped by record remittances, um, exports which are moving in the right direction, also in terms of diversification, what's happening in terms of IT services. Um, and we have, as was mentioned earlier, a primary surplus on the fiscal side. Inflation has been a very good story, and from 38%, I'm sure the speakers have talked about, and 0.7%. So average inflation for the year should be anywhere between 5 to 6%. On the back of that, policy rate down by 1,000 basis points, and so I'm sure the speakers have talked about it. Two things. One, macroeconomic stability is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. As far as I'm concerned, it's basic hygiene. It's basic hygiene, number one. And number two, I was listening to the earlier session, Dr. Bakir. We have been here before. And this time around, we don't want to squander the opportunity, because the boom and bust cycles and the 24th IMF program is not in the interest of anyone, and certainly not for Pakistan. So what we need to do this time around is to avoid the sugar rush. At the moment, to get stability, you go for the growth paradigm, and because our economy has been import dependent and consumption led, the moment you put the foot on the paddle, we get into a balance of payment problem, and we go running back to the lender of the last resort, and we don't want to do it this time around. Now, how do we stay the course? Because that's your question. Of course, there is more uncertainty, and it's protectionism, is whatever is happening on the trade side, demand fragmentation, spillover from financial markets into real markets. So a lot of that is going on in terms of the global risks and some of the regional risks. But I've always maintained that we need to stay focused on what's in our control. And what's in our control is the structural reforms, that the agenda that we have followed, and we are following. And it's all in our hands, notwithstanding everything which is going on in the either on the geopolitical side or on the geoeconomic side. So that reform agenda is going on the taxation side. So the country has been languishing between 9 to 10% tax to GDP. We've said we are going to go to 13.5%. At the end of June, we will close the year 10.6%. So we moved in the right direction. And we can talk about it a bit more in terms of how we are sort of getting there. I think earlier the point was made around the agriculture income tax, which has been legislated now for the first time in the history of Pakistan. But it's also around the reformation or the transformation in the tax authority in terms of people, process, technology. And technology has played a very important role, will continue to play a very important role as we go forward in terms of end-to-end digitalization, bringing transparency, reducing the human interaction, which in turn reduces the leakage, and leakage is an euphemism for corruption. So, and then on the energy side, whatever we are doing in terms of the splitting of the transmission, the distribution companies, their boards have been changed, distribution companies which are going to go into privatization, and we can talk about privatization in a moment. The tariffs, electricity tariffs have come down. So a lot is happening in that space. SOEs. We have agreed in the cabinet that 24 SOEs are going to be moved across into the privatization regime. And we can talk about that as well as you desire. And then whatever is happening in the public finance space, in terms of the right sizing of the federal government, whatever we're doing in terms of debt servicing and debt management, very active debt management, and finally the pension reforms, because people talk about whether the structural reforms are happening or not, and for the first time again, the way agriculture income taxes happen, for the first time, all government colleagues joining as of July 1 of last year, not going forward, there's not a plan, have moved on to defined contribution. So we still have a large number in terms of unfunded liabilities, so we still have to do whatever we need to do to manage that stock, but we have stopped the bleeding. And I do think it's very important that we sort of continue the journey in that direction. And similarly, the levers of growth, right? It's in terms of whatever we need to do on the agriculture side, IT services side, minerals were mentioned, minerals and mining, private sector leading the country, because the government should get the heck out of everything. We should just provide policy framework and policy continuity, and let the private sector sort of lead the country. All of this is in our control. All of this is in our control. So we can get into an excuse culture, and we can get into, we can get distracted, but where we are and where we want to go, I would say most of it is in our control, and we should just stay the course.
So your response to the current difficult situation, or complicated global economic situation, is take the course and complete the reforms that you have begun. This brings us to an important political economy angle, however. Indeed, the Prime Minister's growth strategy, and you personally have called for a change in the DNA of Pakistan's economy, so to speak, in terms of building export capacity beyond the traditional sectors, overhauling the structure of the tax system, as we mentioned, reducing informality and other related reforms. However, in such a grand project, deep reaching reforms, there are always winners and losers. And the losers, even if they are few, may be very vocal and influential. So how do you generate buy-in to make sure that Pakistan continues from this reform path? In other words, how do you convince the skeptical voices in society and in the government that this is the right path forward?
Yeah, I think there are 2-3 ways I would probably like to respond to that. In the first instance, actions have to speak louder than the words. As I said in an earlier session, we've known the what and why of what Pakistan needs to do. There's no dearth of policy prescriptions. Every single day I get something more and something else. This is what we should be doing. This is what we should be doing. What has been missing is implementation, execution, the how and the who part of it. So I think from the macroeconomic stability perspective and some of the structural reforms which are now underway, we have shown that this can be done. Now it's a question of sort of staying the course. So I think in the first instance, the way I look at it, success breeds success, right? If you can show that this can be done, it helps with the buy-in. The other thing is that what I have seen so far, we have, you mentioned political economy. Obviously, the federal government is a coalition. The 4 provinces, PPP leads in one province, even Len leads in another province, PTI leads in another province. There's a coalition in the 4th province, and then of course GB and Azad Kashmir are there as well. The reality is that we could not have moved forward. The reality is that we could not have completed the first 6-month review without whole of the government approach. So while it's good that we would take the credit, but it could not have happened without the help of the provinces. And I've been very vocal in all my presses thanking the chief ministers and the chief ministers of the provinces, starting with the National Fiscal Pact. National Fiscal Pact deals with revenue, deals with expenditure, deals with governance. And governance is very important in the context of FATF because we never want to go back into a grey list. So we have gone and met the chief ministers and we've talked to them, and I have to say they have been extremely responsive. National Fiscal Pact, agriculture income tax. We cannot deliver on the primary surplus if the provinces are not playing their role and deliver on what they have said, what they will do in terms of revenue and expenditure. And so, we talk about charter of economy, and we talk about how different parties should come together. To me, charter of economy in action. Can we do more? Yes, we can do more. But we already have the whole of the government approach in terms of, and I give credit to all, as I said, to all the provinces as we discussed. The last thing I just want to mention, because this thing keeps on coming back, why this stuff? Why this stuff? And I think it's the right question to ask, because there is a healthy dosage of skepticism. They're all the boom and bust cycles, therefore, we keep on coming back to the programs. And if we are going to graduate from this is going to be the last program, we need to stay the course, the structural reforms, because as I just mentioned, taxation. I mean, if you're going to stay within 9 to 10%, those segments which are contributing handsomely to the GDP, whether it's real estate, whether it's wholesale retail, whether it's agriculture, and they're not contributing to the exchequer, it's not going to be feasible. So in some sense, as a country, our hand has been forced. Because if you look at the fiscal side, and the budget is around the corner, right? What can we do? We can go back to the same for more. The formal sector, the manufacturing industry, the salaried class, they're all up to here. They're all up to here. We have done whatever we could have done to squeeze every possible thing out of that. There's no choice but to now expand into the segments which have not been contributing. And they need to. It's as simple as that, because otherwise it's not going to be sustainable. And the other aspect around that is, as I mentioned, the role of technology that we are doing. And the role of technology is the leakage, the theft, the corruption in the system. Right? So there, the end-to-end digitalization that we have done and we continue to do is, for example, we are dealing with now AI-led audits, digital enforcement of the value chains, the track and trace system on the larger sectors, whether it's sugar, whether it's fertilizer, cement, etc. We have seen a real increase in the sales tax, the stuff that was being, was not going through into the exchequer, the faceless customs. So we have removed the nexus between the importer and the person who in the customs who is looking at goods clearance. And early days, I don't want to declare success, but the time for the GD clearance is now down by 70 to 80%, revenues are up by 16%. This is a fact base, because there was an earlier question around, what happens, and these are all things which can be verified as we go forward, because the data and data analytics is now driving everything that we are doing. So that is going to be extremely important, and therefore, on the fiscal side of things, as I said, our hand has been forced. We have to all come along and make it happen. That's on the fiscal side. External side, we are extremely grateful to our bilateral partners. Extremely grateful. There was earlier question asked whether the maturities can be increased, etc., etc. But all our bilateral partners are now very clear that they want to lead with investments. Lead with investments. They want equity investments, they want both seats. And I think it's the right thing for them, it's the right thing for us to make it sustainable. So all of that discussion that you asked for some money, which we then, over a period of time, we roll over, well, that luxury is gone. That luxury is gone. So I cannot kick the can down the road and say, you know, X amount of money has come in, and I can breathe easier for the next year. And therefore, whatever we need to do in terms of reducing exportable surpluses, etc., we can wait for another year, another couple of years. So, the point about fundamentally changing the DNA of the economy, which has to be export-led growth, and it has sort of two aspects to it, and might appear slightly paradoxical given the current discussion that we are having at this point in time. And from my perspective, global trade might take a little bit of backseat, but that's where you should never let a good crisis go to waste. In terms of diversification of the sectors and the diversification of the corridors and the markets. So I think our textile sector, especially the value add segment, is doing very well. We are very grateful. IT services from nowhere will this year take us from anywhere between $3.5 to $4 billion. Pharma is doing well. For the first time, we have the auto sector exporting. Because I've had some very, very good conversations with our entrepreneurs and businessmen responsible in the auto sector. We have given a number of industries protection for the longest time without sunset clauses. And we cannot, as a country, afford that anymore. So every sector has to export, whether it's 1%, 2%, 10%. So that is what we need to do, and you've seen in the first 3 to 4 months, the auto sector has started exporting into Africa. Now let's come to the corridors. I was in Alula in Saudi Arabia, and then for the Goa Forum in China. The regional corridors are going to become extremely important, and we have already been working on that over the last 12 months, especially the Central Asian republics. So whatever we're doing with GCC, the Central Asian republics, Turkey, and then going forward Africa. And whatever we have planned, we just need to double up on that to execute and implement that as we go forward.
Very well, that was a very comprehensive answer, and it's very confirms the ambition in the government program. And I am also encouraged to hear about the all of the government approach, which hopefully signifies that you have achieved some common ground on the need and the substance of economic reforms across most of the political spectrum. But let's talk about public debt now. Public debt has fallen significantly last year, driven by a combination of fiscal adjustment, high inflation, and the return of growth. Indeed, Fitch recently upgraded Pakistan's sovereign credit debt rating, as Professor Rankert and Dr. Bakir mentioned in the previous session. Yet, debt remains relatively high, 70% of GDP. If I'm not mistaken, this year it's projected to tick up a little bit. And also the budget's financing needs remain elevated as well, leading to these discussions with the external partners that you mentioned, frequent discussions. So how do you see the dynamics of public debt and financing needs going forward? And more importantly, what policies can keep them both declining?
Yeah, so public debt to GDP, as you know, it sort of touched 75%, and the current number is now close to 65%. So we have made progress in terms of bringing it down. Overall, if you look at our external debt, it was $100 billion. It's now down by roughly $1.8 billion as well. Still a long way to go, but it's sort of come down. Most of the domestic sort of debt servicing has to do with our domestic debt. And there, given the help that we received from the central bank, is slightly technical, but we received their profit. But on the back of that, we were able to buy back debt, and we were able to also increase the maturity of our domestic debt to about 3.5 years now. As a result of that, our debt servicing cost this year overall has gone down by 1 trillion rupees. So again, a step in the right direction. We expect this going to come down even further next year. Obviously, the policy rate, with the government being the largest borrower, Going down obviously helps. But ultimately, it's come down to, I mean, all of this, the debt side, whether it's domestic or external, the way I look at it, this is derivative. And derivative of lack of fiscal discipline of the government. The more we, increase the revenue, reduce the expenditure, the way we manage our households, the lesser the need for borrowing. It's as simple as that, and therefore, we have to keep on moving towards greater fiscal discipline. The revenue profile will help, but also what we need to do on the government expenditure side also needs to be fixed. And as far as the external debt is concerned, that's all about producing exportable surplus. And what was mentioned in the earlier session about Recodec, and that's the first project which is coming through, and this copper. This is not something which is again in the 10,000 feet. I mean, those folks who followed the Minerals and Mining Conference 2 weeks back, this project is declared, it's already in the works. Last week I met IFC, US Exim, DFC, the financial close is there. So this is not again something which is, which we have to go and look helter-skelter for financing. And the COD is expected, inshallah, in 28. And the reason it's so important that year one is going to give $2.8 billion of export. And by the way, this is export of raw ore. And the government has already announced this is the first and the last project, because Recodec has gone through so many ups and downs like our economy, that we had to take it through the finishing line to actually get it going. But the next projects and the concessions which are going to come in, there is a sliding royalties on that so that we can encourage, and that's the only way forward, is to bring downstream element in there so that the exports going forward in this segment would be on value addition perspective. So think about this way that copper obviously is going to play a very critical role in the energy transition. And we also know in terms of the global supply and demand, given electrification, given EVs and all of that, that a shortage is anticipated. The Datian belt in Pakistan is the supply side answer to that shortage. So this is going to have a huge upside, and the way to look at it, the way to consider it, is that copper is to Pakistan what nickel has been to Indonesia. So if you, again, Indonesia started at a journey 12 to 13 years back, and the latest number is about $22 billion in exports from nickel. So if we continue to produce this exportable surplus, that is how we have to, bring down the external debt. For the time being, the rollovers is fine, the multilateral debt, I mean, 75% of the debt in any case is concessional, but it's still debt. We still have to repay it. These are not grants. So the only way out, the road to market, is fundamentally changing the DNA of the economy towards export-led, and FDI and local investment which produces exportable surpluses.
Thank you. Changing the gear a little bit, Pakistan has a strong need to improve its human development indicators, including by increasing life expectancy and seeing children to primary and secondary schools. This effort is critical for Pakistan to improve the living standards of the population and build a labor force that fit for the economy that can sustain high growth. With the spending mandate in these areas reserved to provinces in Pakistan under the 18th Constitutional Amendment, how could a coordinated national push to build human capital be accomplished?
Yeah, this is obviously one of the indices which is certainly gone south in terms of the health and education, etc. But I actually, I think we need to bring it up to a larger issue, and then see what are the various action steps and the work streams that we need to do. And the larger issue is our population growth. When the country is growing at 2.55%, this is not, we talked about many other things which are immediate issues and immediate imperatives and immediate actions we are taking in terms of the turnaround of the economy. But the sustainability of that, unless we manage this, because linked with is how much we spend on education, how much we spend on health. Obviously, provinces are taking the lead. If you look at what we are able to allocate at the federal level is not a large number. But if you look at all the issues associated with that, with population coming back, before we get to even education, and these are all figures that World Bank reports have come out on this. 40% of the children under the age of 5 stunted. Right? That's the future of Pakistan. And what we have done previously are sort of nutritional interventions. And that in itself can't be the case. Again, we have to have the wider discussion in terms of the right sanitation, water, time between childbirths, again coming back into the population discussion. Learning poverty, girls out of school. If you really want to take a country where we, again, World Bank study says by the time we get to 100, in 2047, we should be a $3 trillion economy. We cannot get there without women becoming a much, much larger part of the productive workforce in the country. So now this is something, you mentioned how our hands are tied in terms of the fiscal space that we have. So a bit long answer, but I'm very, very focused on this because, it's not a question of whether you are the finance minister or someone else should be looking at it. It's such an important and critical part of a sustainable growth pattern. When I was here in April, last year, a few days into my current role, I had a discussion with President of the World Bank, Remittances, and I said there are two existential issues for Pakistan: population and climate. And I know earlier was said we don't want to hear the word climate or whatever, but for us it's not extreme weather patterns, it's not episodic instances like the 22 floods. We are living climate change day in and day out. Only a couple of weeks back we had a hailstorm in Islamabad, where sort of the ice wall, whatever, coming down to the size of the golf balls, and I don't know how many cars and vehicles were damaged. And the same day, it was soaring temperatures in Karachi. We're living it. We don't have to get into extreme weather patterns and episodic stuff. So I mentioned it, and therefore we have now entered into a 10-year country partnership framework with World Bank, and through which the reason is 10 years and it's not like 2 years or 3 years, because everything that we're talking about, whether it is population related, because when you talk about education health, I'm just linking it back into population. Interventions will require longer term solutions, and similarly on the climate side, we have to do the same thing. So we have the funding and financing available now. It's a question of everything else, right? And as I mentioned earlier, as our bilateral partners have, and you have seen that, they have come up with very large numbers in terms of their investment appetite for investing in Pakistan. Very large numbers. Whether it's Saudi, whether it's UAE, whether it's Qatar. It's now up to us to come up with investable, bankable projects. The ball is in our court. And that easy life of just getting something, money in and so rolling it is gone. It's gone. So the same thing here, tough policy choices, but funding and financing and fiscal space is available.
Thank you. You actually anticipated my next question, which was about the extreme weather events and their effects on the economy. Can you please elaborate on what actions is the government taking to mitigate the economic consequences of such events? And how can the international community help in this respect?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier around what we're doing. So as far as the country is concerned, obviously we have our NDC is already announced. We have a climate prosperity plan which is in the works. We rolled out climate finance strategy in Baku last year. So a lot of building blocks are already in place. In terms of, again, financing, I just mentioned the World Bank. Of course, the IMF, it has to go to the executive board early May. $1.3 billion in terms of RSF, which has 13 reform measures associated with that. I was at the loss and damage fund discussion last week in terms of seeing how we operationalize it. And my only message there was, we have enough bureaucracy in Pakistan. Can you please cut down on your bureaucracy and don't create yet another bureaucracy like the Green Climate Fund, where in Manila it takes years to even get stuff and people accredited before we can even access financing. So I think that's all there. Then it's a question of the capital markets. So green sukuks. We've just launched the green sukuk for the government of Pakistan 2 days back, locally, domestically. And when we have all ducks in the row, then the investor appetite is there, right? Because for the Kerala State Utility, Wabda, a few years back, that we did the inaugural, they did the green bond. It was led by JP Morgan, and there was no government guarantee. They printed $500 million. They didn't exercise the green shoe option. But the investor appetite was $3 billion. So it's 6 times oversubscribed. So again, the funding is going to be there. Last week I met some of the international banks. They're talking about debt for nature swaps and debt for development swap. All of that is there. For us, again, I keep on coming back to it. The ball is in our court to come up with those projects which can be structured, which can be monitored, which can be reported with national standards. If you think about it, after the flooding in Geneva, the international community was extremely generous. We got pledges of anywhere between $9 to $10 billion. Very little of that actually flew in, because only a small component of that was grants. The rest was all project financing. And so we need to acknowledge the work that is required at our end, but we have agreed that with the new Minister of Climate Finance, a number of these things we will co-chair some of these initiatives, because we will get the funding in Ministry of Finance, right? So the funding is there. But then it's all the other ministries along with the private sector. I'm very keen that the private sector should lead a number of these initiatives, and we should provide them the financing and support as we go forward. Real issue, and we need to, see how we go forward, but the funding is there.
Again, changing the direction a little bit, and I'm going to take advantage of your previous life as a senior banker for many years. How do you see the future of Pakistan's financial sector generally, and what are the reforms that are needed to get there?
Well, the banking sector is actually doing extremely well. The former regulator, Dr. Bakr, is sitting there as the governor of the central bank, and the ex-governor of the central bank. This is actually one of the success stories on the preparation side. Healthy profits. In fact, a lot of people say maybe too much profits. But well-capitalized banks. One of the criticisms is that they lend too much money to the government, which is factually correct. But the way I always look at it when I was on the other side, and I say the same thing, that if we behave in the government and we show fiscal discipline, there is no need to borrow that kind of money and therefore all the stuff that we talked about crowding out the private sector, etc. So, in any case, we are in a good place now. So I think going forward, it's not less about reforms; it's more about where they now need to deploy funds. And from my perspective, it's lending to the private sector and especially the private sector lending, right? Which is agriculture, which is IT, export-led discussion. I would never ever advocate directed lending because it's the wrong thing to do. We need to create the right incentivization structures for the banks to come in and make it feasible and take them in the direction of where they should play a real role, including the capital markets, including many other things that they can do as they go forward.
Thank you. My last question. Here in the audience, we have many students who aspire, hopefully, to a career in public policy, economics, and finance. What is your advice to them? What is the best way for them to achieve their dreams?
This is an interesting one. I must say this current role I never planned for. So so it was not something which I said, you know, that's my next move. In any case, it's a privilege to serve the country in this role. I think a couple of things which I would say. One is whatever you are doing, make and take decisions. I've always said in my corporate life, I'd say that here as well, timely decisions, timely execution. Whether it's the smallest enterprise or the largest country, you know, this, you can never go wrong with the decisions, and especially all of you, since we're here, you are leaders in your own right. Leaders, people look to you and to us to make decisions, and I think that's very important as you go forward. Other is, you know, get out of your comfort zones. I know you're doing this, and you know, just geographies, functions, try things out. I think that's very very important as you look forward. The last thing I would say, and I think I should have started with that, it's actually now the other way around. Because as our generation sort of fades away, it's actually we need to ask them what is their advice, and they need to be our mentors as we go forward. And you know, in my with my previous employer, we actually went for that. We had some of our associates who were appointed as mentors to the executive committee. Now I can't say there was a total buy-in to that. Some of the executive committees thought this was ridiculous, but the reality is these are the ladies and gentlemen who, especially in today's world, AI-led world and everything else, they don't need to ask us what is right, what is wrong. They have the things on their fingertips. They have the data analytics available with them all the time. And I think that just as I said, coming back to the earlier point about making decisions, because that is still going to be where the human intervention is going to be required. Data gathering, data analytics, but still we'll need someone essentially to decide, and that's where it should play a leading role. And it's really that reason that the Crypto Council that we formed 2.5 months back, which I chair, it's a 30-year gentleman who's heading that council. And we listen to him, we hear him out, and that's the new world order, right? So I think the important thing is we hear all of them and get their advice, not the other way around.
Well, let's do. I was going to say, let's do exactly that and open the floor for questions and answers.
So we ask that you keep questions concise and make questions, not statements. Let's open the floor.
You're the boss.
There's a gentleman in the light green jacket. We'll collect a few questions and then the next will answer them afterwards.
Thank you so much for coming here. My question is mostly about the private sector lending in Pakistan, which is currently less than 12% of GDP. Also in regards to the ADR ratio, which is the lowest in the region. And also on top of that, we have $1 billion of export rebates that are not paid back to exporters. How do you say that funding and financing is fully available for these exporters when they're struggling to get access to private sector credit? Also, on top of that, we have other issues similar to like the anti-canal protest. We have so many containers on the highways which are not being released just because of these protests. And there's over $1.8 million of losses that we have to face. How do you recommend the government to remedy this? Thank you.
This is actually not one question.
So let's collect a couple more.
No, but let me very quickly address that. On the private sector,
Gentleman.
on the lending side, of course, now the Exim Bank is
Black
there.
FK, yes.
A lot of refinance schemes have moved across to the Exim Bank, and we will provide from the ministry them requisite support that wherever refinance is required, we continue to do that. As far as refunds are concerned, that is an FDR discussion, that is not a banking discussion. And especially for the exporters, we are quite clear that we are going to issue the refunds within a week of the previous month. Maybe we are falling short on that to a certain extent, but by and large, we are doing, as you know, we've covered a lot of good ground on that front. And we are very clear that we will be prompt in those refunds. The third thing, as you know, the Prime Minister and Chairman Bilawal, they had a press conference on this. Post that, we should have expected that some of this will go away. But if they're waiting for the CCI, then the CCI is around the corner, and that will happen, so that we, don't get into this discussion going forward in terms of blockage of roads, etc.
Yeah, well, gentleman in the black hat, and then we'll
Right here.
select some others.
Thank you, Minister. Just quickly, thank you for your appraisal. Broadly speaking, does the lack of democratic legitimacy amongst many of the ruling institutions in the country bother you as an appraiser of the economy, considering that you are banking on long-term political stability as at least one factor of macroeconomic stability? Does it bother you that a lot of institutions currently in power, some you recommend as, or rather represent as the finance minister, does it bother you that they're still in power and aren't supposed to be in power?
Thank you.
If you look at, I'll give you an example. In Singapore, Professor Kishore Mahbubani, who has been a very important diplomat for Singapore, he once said, how did Singapore move from a third world to a first world country? And he said it can be attributed to MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism, honesty. Pragmatism was their form of governance in Singapore. So it's as simple as that. And I've already mentioned in terms of the fantastic support we are getting, irrespective of the party affiliation from the various provinces. We could not have been here without that active help from the provinces. I'm very grateful to the provinces. And
The lady in the purple there is over there.
Hi, thank you for speaking. You touched really briefly about remittances, and I was just wondering, what are you doing, what are you planning on doing to be able to make sure that Pakistan's strongest assets its youth is studying in Pakistan, but also staying in Pakistan to be able to foster a homegrown economy. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't totally get the question.
Human capital staying in Pakistan.
Yeah. What
There you go.
are you doing to make sure that the youth are staying in Pakistan and not taking
that
their
sounded
talents
like-
outside?
Yeah, I think it's a question of obviously getting into the right opportunity set. We're very fortunate to be in a country which has the fourth largest freelancer population in the country. I'm not a big believer in terms of government committing and talking about big numbers and getting jobs. We should be providing the ecosystem, and freelancers is a case in point where we give them the right ecosystem and they working from their homes, etc. And more importantly, getting into now value addition. Because if we look at it, and there's a very good example of people who go abroad, it's okay. I went abroad, I was away for longest time, I come back, it's okay, we come back and contribute back to the country in different ways. In Lums, last week, I believe it was the 22nd or 23rd of April, a very successful Pakistani entrepreneur of Pakistan origin has donated $15 million to Lums to start the blockchain curriculum in Lums. So people who get the opportunity, who go abroad, they are our ambassadors. It's fine in a country of 240 million people. Get the right opportunity, work. In any case, that comes back and helps us with the remittances. But we also are very clear that we need to continue to provide the right ecosystem to retain the talent in Pakistan.
All right, well, last question.
By the way, I will, if you are staying for tea or whatever outside, I plan to be outside. So in case some of the questions cannot be taken, I'll be more than happy to answer to you when I'm out there.
This is great because we have many more questions than we can answer here.
One last.
Here's the last question.
Yes,
Hi,
Dr.
Minister. First of all, welcome to Boston. I know you've had a pretty busy week this past one. You mentioned in the bank fund meeting, staff meeting as well, and a couple of other times you've been asked this question. Why should we be hopeful that this 24th program is going to be probably the last one? Because in our history, we've seen this as a sinusoidal wave. We see the country progressing forward, there's optimism, and then it's a reversal again. So to end it on a hopeful note, you've given a really great answer to the audience in DC. It would be really nice for this audience to
I'm
get
afraid
that.
you might have missed it earlier. When I already, Nikolai had asked me that question, I said the same thing, which I said at the fund thing. It's, I think it's about time that we do the right thing, we come together. And let's not get into the academic discussion, etc. Charter economy is already happening. And as far as I'm concerned, it's in action at this point in time. Another thing is, as I said earlier, as a country, our hand has been forced, right? We cannot continue to go back to the same for more on the fiscal side, and on the external side, it's going to be now investment-led discussion. So we'll need to work harder to get it, but we have a fantastic opportunity to move forward on a not only stronger but on a more sustainable wicket as we go forward.
Thank you.
Say something.
For being here. So in 10 minutes, the Mukhala is going to start in the same room. So see you there. See you here.
Okay, that was the Finance Minister Aurungzeb wrapping up at Harvard. Insanely technocratic and very, very jargon-driven discussion. I'm not impressed, especially जो मैंने सवाल पूछा था. I asked a very simple question that how does he think that the institutions that he represents, considering their lack of democratic legitimacy, how do they factor into long-term macroeconomic stability? इसका इन्होंने अजीब सा जवाब दिया, कहा कि सिंगापुर में भी ये हुआ था, तो इधर भी ये हो रहा है. I'm not sure if that works. बीच में आपने देखा होगा कि इसका मतलब वाज़े है. बेसिकली इसका मतलब मोटा मोटा ये है कि डिक्टेटरशिप प्रैग्मेटिज्म है. उन्होंने कहा बेसिकली प्रैग्मेटिज्म और ऑनेस्टी से बात चलेगी वापस. सो अगर डिक्टेटरशिप प्रैग्मेटिज्म है तो फिर ये इतनी बड़ी हुकूमत क्यों रखी हुई है? फौजी हर चीज़ चलाएं. अनबिलीवेबल. ये मैं सलमान अकरम राजा से भी एग्री करता हूँ. उन्होंने थोड़ी देर पहले कहा था कि जब हम ये अपना बात करते हैं इन्फ्लेशन की और IMF रीफाइनेंसिंग की और ये सब ज़बरदस्त चीज़ों की, इसमें हम भूल जाते हैं कि फंडामेंटल्स जो हैं वो ख़त्म हुए हैं. मुल्क में इंसाफ ख़त्म हुआ. मगर ये जो बड़े बड़े इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं, जैसे इधर है हार्वर्ड, जैसे इधर है पूरा अमेरिका. शुरू में भी दिन में यही बात हुई थी कि इनके लिए अमेरिका के लिए, स्टेट डिपार्टमेंट के लिए, अमेरिकियों के लिए, वाइट हाउस के लिए पाकिस्तान में जो नाइंसाफ़ी हो रही है, जो पाकिस्तान में जो आप कह सकते हैं जंगल का राज है, वो इट्स इररेलेवेंट. Democratic norms, human rights violations are not a problem for the people who are running this place here. That's the verdict. अब इसको आप कैसे ले जा सकते हैं आगे, आपको खुद समझ आनी चाहिए. लोगों ने सवाल पूछे, अच्छे सवाल पूछे, but overall the scene is it is what it is. ये था हार्वर्ड से लेटेस्ट. अभी मुझे कुछ और समझ आती है तो मैं पूछता हूँ. हम किधर थे आज? हमने 2 लाइव्स किए हैं. एक हमने हार्वर्ड के इस ऑडिटोरियम से किया है डेमोक्रेसी एंड रूल ऑफ लॉ पे सलमान अकरम राजा और हामिद मीर साहब के साथ, और एक अभी फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर औरंगजेब साहब के साथ किया है. सामने ये इस वक्त एम्बेसडर जो हैं आए हुए हैं, वो औरंगजेब साहब गप्पे लगा रहे हैं. मुझे अभी इधर से इजाज़त दें. I'll talk to you soon. पाकिस्तान